Okey diyoruz, en son ne oldu? Bayağı kısa bir bölüm okuduk. Şuradan şurası, başka bir şey değil. Bu bölümde ne konuştu? Böyle arkadaşlık üstüne konuştu. İşte böyle silence hakkında bir tık uzun konuştu. Benim dikkatimi çekecek kadar. Sonra böyle işte kitabın en başındaki konuştuğu silence falan geldi böyle aklıma. Yani bir önemi olabilir ama varsa bile ben fark etmedim. Ekstradan bir şey. Onun dışında işte dediydim sanırım. Arkadaşların üstüne konuştu. Güzel bir şekilde konuştu. Böyle bir tık efkarlandım falan. Oturduğum yerden diyeyim. Kvot sarhoş oldu. Üç arkadaş. Tim, Willem, Kvot, bunların üçü sarhoş bir şekilde üniversiteye doğru yürüyorlardı falan. Ondan bahsetti. Okey. Durum bu. Chapter 60. Fortune demiş. Kvot'un yeni Fortune'undan bahsediyor sanırım. The next day, I went to the admissions lottery sporting my very first hangover. Weary and vaguely nauseous, I joined the shortest line and tried to ignore the din of hundreds of students milling about, buying, selling, trading, and generally complaining about the slots they'd drawn for their exams. Quarter Leiden's son, I said, when I finally arrived at the front of the line. The bored-looking woman marked my name, and I drew a tile out of the black velvet bag. It read, Hefton, noon, 5 days from now, plenty of time to prepare. But as I turned back to the muse, a thought occurred to me. How much preparation did I really need? More importantly, how much could I genuinely accomplish without access to the archives? Thinking it over, I raised my hand over my head with my middle finger and thumb extended. Bir dakika. Şöyle diyor. Bu ne peki? Signaling that I had a slot 5 days from now that I was willing to sell. Ha. Böyle bir yapınca bu anlama mı geliyor? Bir dakika. I raised my hand over my head with my middle finger and thumb extended. Aynen. Signaling that I had a slot 5 days from now that I was willing to sell. It wasn't long before an unfamiliar student wandered close. Fourth day, she said, holding up her own tile. I give you a job to trade. I shook my head. She shrugged and wandered away. Şöyle etmiş. Galvin, a relar from the medica, approached me. He held up his index finger, indicating he had a slot later this afternoon. From the circles under his eyes and his anxious expression, I didn't think he was eager to go through testing that soon. Will you take 5 jobs? I'd like to get a whole talent. He nodded, flipping his own tile over between his fingers. It was a fair price. No one wanted to go to admissions on the first day. Maybe later, I'll look around a little first. As I watched him leave, I marveled at the difference a single day could make. Yesterday, 5 jobs would have seemed like all the money in the world, but today my purse was heavy. I was lost in vague musings about how much money I had actually earned last night when I saw Willem and Simon approaching. Will looked a little pale under his dark, sealdish complexion. I guess he was feeling the after effects of our nice carousing too. Simon, on the other hand, was bright and sunny as ever. Guess who drew slots this afternoon? He nodded over my shoulder. Ambrose and several of his friends. It's enough to make me believe in a just universe. Turning to search the crowd, I heard Ambrose's voice before I saw him. From the same bag, that means they did a poor job mixing. They should restart this whole mismanaged shaman. Ambrose was walking with several well-dressed friends, their eyes sweeping over the crowd, looking for raised hands. Ambrose was a dozen feet away before he finally looked down and realized the hand he was heading toward was mine. He stopped short, scolding, then gave a sudden barking laugh. You poor boy, all the time in the world and no way to spend it. Hasn't Lauren let you back in yet? Hammer and horn will sit wearily behind me. Ambrose smiled at me. Tell you what, I give you a penny and one of my old shirts for your slot. That way, you'll have something to wear when you're washing that one in the river. A few of his friends chuckled behind him, looking me up and down. Haklı Diaz. I kept my expression nonchalant, not wanting to give him any satisfaction. Truth was, I was all too aware of the fact that I only owned 2 shirts. And after 2 terms of constant wear, they were getting shabby. What's more, I did wash them in the river, as I'd never had money to spare for laundry. I'll pass, I said lightly. Your short tails are a little richly dyed for my taste. I tugged at the front of my own shirt to make my point clear. Şöyle bir şey diyor herhalde. A few nearby students laughed. I don't get it, I heard Sim say quietly to Will. He's implying Ambrose has the will passed. The meta task, a disease you get from horse. There is a discharge. Okay, Sim said quickly. I get it. Ick. Ambrose is wearing green too. Meanwhile, Ambrose forced himself to chuckle along with the crowd at my joke. I suppose I deserve that, he said. Very well, pennies for the poor. He brought out his purse and shook it. How much do you want? 5 talents, I said. He stared at me, frozen in the act of opening his purse. It was an outrageous price. A few of the spectators nudged each other with their elbows, obviously hoping I'd somehow swindle Ambrose into paying several times what my slot was actually worth. I am sorry, I asked. Do you need that converted? It was a well-known fact that Ambrose had botched the arithmetic portion of his admissions last term. 5 is ridiculous, he said. You'd be lucky to get one this late in the day. I forced a careless shrug. I'd settle for 4. You'll settle for 1, Ambrose insisted. I'm not an idiot. I took a deep breath, let it out again, resigned. I don't suppose I could get you to go as high as 1 and 4, I asked, disgusted by how plaintive my voice sounded. Plaintive derken. Acıklı ağlamaklı yastasızlanan dertli okey diyoruz. Ambrose smiled like a shark. I tell you what, he said magnanimously. I give you 1 and 3. I'm not above a little charity now and again. Thank you, sir, I said meekly. It's much appreciated. I could sense the crowd's disappointment as I rolled over like a dog for Ambrose's money. Don't mention it, Ambrose said smugly. Always a pleasure to help out the needy. In British coin, that'll be 2 nobles, 6 bits, 2 pennies, and 4 shillings. I can do my own conversion, he snapped. I traveled the world with my father's retinue since I was a boy. I know how money spends. Of course you do, I ducked my head, silly of me. I looked up curiously. You've been to Modek then? Of course, he said absent-mindedly as he proceeded to dig through his purse, pulling out an assortment of coins. I've actually been to High Court in Kershaven twice. Is it true that the Modegan nobility regard haggling as a contemptible activity for those of any high-born station? I asked innocently. I heard that they consider it a sure sign that a person is either possessed of low blood or fallen on truly desperate times. Ambrose looked up at me, frozen halfway through the act of digging coins out of his purse. His eyes narrowed. Because if that's true, it's terribly kind of you to come down to my level just for the fun of a little bargain. I grinned at him. We will love to dicker. There was a murmur of laughter from the crowd around us. It had grown to several dozen people at this point. That's not it at all, Ambrose said. My face became a mask of concern. Oh, I'm sorry, my lord. I had no idea you'd come on hard times. I took several steps toward him, holding out my admissions tire. Here, you can have it for just a penny. I'm not above a little charity myself. I stood directly in front of him, holding out the tire. Please, I insist. It's always a pleasure to help the needy. Ambrose glared furiously. Keep it and chalk, he hissed at me in a low voice. And remember this when you're eating beans and washing in the river. And still be here the day you live with nothing but your hands in your pockets. He turned and left. The very picture of affronted dignity. There was a smattering of applause from the surrounding crowd. I took flourishing bows in all directions. How will you score that one? Will ask Sim. 2 for Ambrose, 3 for Quatsim looked at me. Not your best work, really. I didn't get much sleep last night, I admitted. Every time you do this, it makes the eventual payback that much worse, Will said. We can't do anything but snap at each other, I said. The masters made sure of that. Anything too extreme would get us expelled for conduct and becoming a member of the Arcanum. Why do you think I haven't made this life a hell? You're lazy, Will suggested. Laziness is one of my best characteristics, I said easily. If I weren't lazy, I might go through the work of translating a meta task and grow terribly offended when I discover it means the Edema trip. I raised my hand again, thumb and middle finger extended. Instead, I'll assume it translates directly into the name of the disease, Neisseria, thus preventing any unnecessary strain on our friendship. I eventually sold my slot to a desperate relar from the fishery named Jackson. I drove a hard bargain, trading him my slot for 6 jaws and a favor to be named later. Admissions went about as well as could be expected, considering I couldn't study. Heme was still carrying his grudge. Lauren was cool. Elodin had his head down on the table and seemed to be asleep. My tuition was a full 6 talents, which put me in an interesting situation. The long road to Imre was most deserted. The sun brushed through the trees, and the wind carried just a hint of the cool that fall would soon be bringing. I headed to the Aeolian first to retrieve my lute. Stanchion had insisted that I leave it there last night, lest I break it on my long, inebriated walk home. As I approached the Aeolian, I saw Dioch lounging against a doorpost, walking a coin across the back knuckles of his hand. He smiled when he saw me. Oh there, thought you and your friends would end up in the river by the way you were weaving when you left last night. We were swaying in different directions, I explained, so it balanced out. Dioch laughed. You got your lady inside. I felt down a flush and wondered how he had known I was hoping to find Dana here. I don't know if I would call her my lady exactly. Savoy was my friend after all. He shrugged. Whatever you call her, Stanchions got her behind the bar. I'd go grab her before he gets overly familiar and starts practicing his fingering. KDS. I felt a flash of rage and barely managed to swallow a mouthful of hot words. My lute. He was talking about my lute. I ducked inside quickly, guessing that less the urge saw of my expression, the better it would be. I wandered through the 3 levels of the Aeolian, but then I was nowhere to be found. I did run into Count Trap, though, who enthusiastically invited me to have a seat. I don't suppose I might persuade you to pay me a visit at my house sometime, Trap asked bashfully. I'm thinking of having a little dinner, and I know a few people who would love to meet you, he winked. Word about your performance is already getting around. I felt a twinge of anxiety, but I knew rubbing elbows with the nobility was something of a necessary evil. I'd be honored too, my lord, Trap grimaced. Does it have to be, my lord? Diplomacy is a large part of being a trooper, and a large portion of diplomacy is adherence to title and rank. Etiquette, my lord, I said regretfully. Peace on etiquette, Trap said petulantly. Etiquette is a set of rules people use so they can be rude to each other in public. I was born, güzel dedim ben şunu. I was born the novice first, Trap second, and Count last of all. He looked imploringly up at me. Then for short, I hesitated. Here at least, he pleaded. It makes me feel like a weed in a flower bed when someone starts lording me here. I relax. If it makes you happy, then. He flushed as if I'd flattered him. Tell me a bit about yourself, then. Where are you lodging? On the other side of the river, I said evasively. The banks in Meuse were not exactly glamorous. When Trep gave me a puzzled look, I continued. I attend the university. The university, he asked, clearly puzzled. Are they teaching music now? I almost laughed at the thought. No, I am in the Arcana. I immediately regretted my words. He leaned back in his seat and gave me an uncomfortable look. You're a warlock. Oh no, I said dismissively. I'm just studying, grammar, mathematics. I picked two of the more innocent fields of study I could think of, and he seemed to relax a bit. I guess I just thought that you were. He trailed off and shook himself. Why are you studying that? The question caught me off guard. I've always wanted to. There's so much to learn. But you don't need any of that. I mean, he groped for words. The way you play, surely your patron is encouraging you to focus on your music. I don't have a patron then, I said with a shy smile. Not that I am opposed to the idea, mind you. His reaction was not what I expected. Then my blackened luck. He stepped his hand on the table hard. I assumed someone was being coy, keeping you a secret. He thumped the table with his fist. Damn. He recovered his composure a little and looked up at me. I'm sorry. It's just that he made a frustrated gesture and sighed. Have you ever heard the saying, one wife, you're happy, two and you are tired? I know the three and they'll hate each other. 4 and they'll hate you. Trap finished. But the same thing is doubly true for patrons and their musicians. I just picked up my third, a struggling flutist. He sighed and shook his head. They bicker like cats in a bag, worried they're not getting enough attention. If only I'd known you were coming along, I would have waited. You flatter me then. I'm kicking myself is what I'm doing, he sighed and looked guilty. That's not fair. Saffron's good at what he does. They're all good musicians and protective of me, just like real boys. He gave me an apologetic look. If I try to bring you in, there'll be hell to pay. I've already had to lie about that little gift I gave you last night. So I'm your mistress then, I grinned. Trap chuckled. Let's not carry the analogy too far. I'll be your matchmaker instead and help you tower the proper patron. I know everyone with blood or money for 50 miles, so it shouldn't be that hard. That will be a great help, I said earnestly. The social circles on this side of the river are a mystery to me. A thought occurred to me. Speaking of which, I met a young lady last night and didn't find out much about her. If you're familiar with the town, I trailed off hopefully. He gave me a knowing look. I see. No, I protested. She's a girl that sang along with me. My yellow wine. I was just hoping to find her to pay my respects. Trap looked as if he didn't believe me, but wasn't going to make an issue of it. Fair enough. What's her name? The end. Trap seemed to be waiting for more. That's all I know. Trap snorted. What did she look like? Sing it if you have to. I felt the beginning of a flush on my cheeks. She had dark hair to about here. I gestured a little lower than my shoulder with one hand. Young, fair skin. Trap watched me expectantly. Pretty, I see. Trap mused, rubbing his lips. Did she have her talent pipes? I don't know. Maybe. Does she live in the city? I shrugged my ignorance again, feeling more and more foolish. Trap laughed. You're going to have to give me more than that. He looked over my shoulder. Wait, there is George. If anyone could spot a girl for you, it would be him. He raised his hand. George falan bağırıyor. It's really not that important, I said hurriedly. Trap ignored me and waved a broad-shouldered man over to our table. George strolled over and leaned against the table. What can I do for you? Our young singer needs a little information about a lady that he met last night. Can't say I'm surprised. There were quite a crowd of lollies at. One or two asked about you. He winked at me. Who caught your eye? It's not like that, I protested. She was the one who sang my harmony last night. She had a lovely voice and I was hoping to find her so we could do a little singing. I think I know the tune you're talking about. He gave me a broad, knowing smile. I felt myself blushing furiously and began to protest again. Now settle down. I keep this one between my tongue and teeth. And even keep from telling stanchion, which is as good as telling the whole town. He gossips like a schoolgirl when he is at a car. He looked at me expectantly. She was slender with deep coffee-colored eyes, I said, before I thought about how it sounded. I hurried on before either Trevor or Dioch could make a joke. Her name was Diane. Ah, Dioch nodded slowly to himself, his smile going a little wry. I guess I should have known. Does she live here? Trep asked. I don't believe I know her. You'd remember, Dioch said, but no, I don't think she lives in town. I see her off and on. She travels, always here and gone again. He rubbed the back of his head and gave me a worried smile. I don't know where you might be able to find her. Careful, boy, that one will steal your heart. Men fall for her like wheat before a sickle blade. I shrugged as if such things couldn't be further from my mind, and was glad when Trep turned the topic to a piece of gossip about one of the local councilmen. I chuckled at their bickering until my drink was done, then made my farewells and took my leave of them. Half an hour later, I stood on the stairway outside Devi's door. Bu Devi'nin olduğu sahneleri çok seviyorum. Yani gittikçe zamanım azalıyor. Şu an üzüldüm Devi'yi okuyamayacağımız için. Devi'yi okumayı sevdiğimi fark ettim. Okay. Trying to ignore the rancid smell of the butcher's shop below. I counted my money for the third time and thought about my options. I could pay off my entire debt and still afford my tuition, but it would leave me penniless. I had other debts to settle as well, and as much as I wanted to be out from under Davy's thumb, I didn't relish starting the semester without a bit of coin in my pocket. The door opened suddenly, startling me. Davy's face peered out suspiciously through a narrow crack, then brightened with a smile when she recognized me. What are you looking for? She asked. Gentlemen knock, as a rule. She opened the door wide to let me in. Okay, bana ayrılan sürenin sonuna geldik. Bu sayfaya bakacağım, okumaya devam edeceğiz. Onun dışında diyecek bir şeyim var mı? Düşünüp geliyorum. Nope, hadi görüşürüz.